Hi, welcome to the channel. So today I'm going to play a short clip from a pastor called Phil Schlamp, who is speaking about the meaning of the exception clause. This is commonly thought to mean you could divorce and remarry if your husband or wife has committed adultery. So it's found in Matthew 5:31-32 and 19:9. Phil is going to explain clearly by using other verses in Scripture that this verse does not mean you can divorce and remarry if your spouse has committed adultery. And he goes on to explain that there are no other verses in the New Testament that give you the right to divorce your husband or wife if it is a first marriage.
The Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying to him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason?" Now, it doesn't say it here, but they're pitting Jesus against the Rabbi Hillel and Shammai. And he answered and said to them, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God hath joined together, let no man separate." End of subject. You see, he did not, wrong place here. The Pharisees have questioned Jesus on our precise topic, and Jesus said, well, you know what Genesis 2 says, so there is no divorce allowable. That's it. And what do? They go to the passage they always went to show that Moses commanded divorce in certain cases. Look at verse 7. They said to him, "Why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?" What did I just tell you before? Moses never commanded it. Now look at Jesus' answer in verse 8. He said, "Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts," what? "Permitted you to divorce your wife." Moses never commanded them to divorce their wives, as we have seen. By not insisting that such a woman be stoned, he was permitting divorce. Joseph wanted to use this permission in the case of Mary. So as I see it, both Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Jesus took the view that I am presenting to you. That brings us to the two most used passages in Scripture for divorce and remarriage in the New Testament. We go to Matthew chapter 5. These are the most used passages, chapter 5, 31 through 32. "Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery." This is basically the same as the verses in Matthew 19, only in that passage more is added. So we go back to chapter 19. And I will clarify some of these words here in a moment. Now look at verse 9. "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery." This is verse, along with chapter 5, verses 31 through 32, that is most used in allowing divorce in our churches today. The ground given is that the issue here is marital infidelity or unfaithfulness during marriage. Normally it is said, this is true in churches today, the innocent party is told they may remarry and the guilty party may not. Well, you know what the guilty party does? They go get married somewhere else, then come to the church and church takes them in. No problem. Some churches will refuse to remarry a divorced person, but if another church marries them, then they'll accept them in. Oh, the inconsistencies in the church are horrendous. Well, the controversial part of 19:9 and 5:32 is "accept it before." And all new versions fail to tell the truth here, including the New King James Version. They have succumbed to the pressure of modern day. They say such things as, "accept it be for adultery," or "accept it be for unfaithfulness," or marital unfaithfulness, or infidelity, and such like. And none of those words occur in the text. The word for marital unfaithfulness or infidelity or such like is Adultery. Adultery, moikia in the original. But here the word is porneia. Now, porneia is a specialized word for a certain kind of physical immorality. It is the sin of unmarried people, not married people. And you might ask, how can this text speak of the physical immorality on the part of single people when the woman is called a wife and they seem to be married? The answer is that Jesus here allowed for divorce in the case of unfaithfulness during the betrothal stage of marriage. That's why it's called porneia. That is before they were physically united as a couple. That is consistent with Moses. And here's a question. Why does Matthew include this exception clause and Mark and Luke do not? Matthew wrote his gospel to the Jewish people. I don't think any scholar will argue with that. The real question here is, why don't Mark and Luke give this same clause? And the answer is, they weren't writing to the Jewish people. It doesn't count for that. It doesn't count for us. There is no divorce for us. And I don't think any Bible teacher will argue that Mark and Luke wrote to a Gentile audience. Here's the simple answer. Jesus is here giving the same exceptions that the Lord gave through Moses in Deuteronomy 22 and 24, 1 through 4. This man has found that his wife has not been true before marriage, and in such cases the Lord, through Moses, allowed for divorce, or the husband could charge her publicly and then have her stoned. So the Bible is consistent. Moses in Deuteronomy 24 allowed an exception to be made if unfaithfulness took place before or during betrothal. Joseph, the husband of Mary, considered using this exception. Jesus in Matthew 5:32 and 19:9 allowed for the very same exception. Is there any evidence that this is the correct interpretation? Well, let me give you 7 points. First, in the beginning, God said that after marriage, a man and a woman became one flesh. Divorce violates the one flesh principle. So a no divorce position was held until the time of Moses. That is consistent with the interpretation of these two crucial verses. Second, if the Mosaic concession to divorce in Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4 is as we gave it, then that is in favor of a no divorce after marriage position, which is consistent with the teaching of the previous 2,500 years. Third, this interpretation is consistent with the case of Joseph's betrothal to Mary in Matthew 1, 18 through 25. Fourth, it is agreed by Bible scholars that the book of Matthew is written to the Jews. Matthew writing to the Jews would naturally include the exception clause because it is directly applicable to the betrothal system of the marriage that they used. Fifth, Mark and Luke, whose books were not written to the Jews but to Gentiles, do not include the exception clause. They simply forbid divorce altogether. Mark 10, 11 through 12, Luke 16, 18, we will see them later. Sixth, the word porneia does not refer to unfaithfulness after marriage, but before marriage. So we ask, is there biblical support for the view that porneia is unfaithfulness before marriage? In other words, is porneia physical immorality on the part of unmarried, or does it also include physical unfaithfulness of the married? Physical unfaithfulness of the married is referred to in Scripture as moikia, adultery, not porneia. Furthermore, if porneia and moikia are both used in the same list of sins, or they are both used in the same list of sins, if porneia is a broad term, as all the new translations give it, of physical immorality, then we have a serious problem when both terms are used in the same list. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10, Galatians 5, 19 through 21. I told you I'm speeding. You can look that up for yourself. Seventh and last, after Jesus has answered the disciples' question in Matthew 19, the disciples' response was, wow, if that's the case of a man with a woman, it is better never to marry. You have taken a very strong stand. That was their response. If Jesus had meant that in the case of marital unfaithfulness of any kind one could divorce, as our churches do today, the disciples would not have responded like that. They would have said, ha, that's exactly what we thought. He's with Shammai. But when they understood what Jesus was saying, they were shocked. It is time to shock the church today.